What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of ATD's Ask a Trainer series. I'm Jess Thompson, Content Manager for Learning and Development at ATD. ATD Research just released its latest report on measuring impact. And to dive a little deeper into the report, I've invited Dr. Alaina Szlachta, founder and lead learning architect at By Design Development Solutions, to chat with me about how to be a data-driven organization and practical strategies to improve your data literacy in and out of work. So stick around. Hi, Elena. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Ask a Trainer. How are you today?
I am doing fantastic. We were just talking about how the weather is changing here, and officially we're into fall, and I can't tell you how relieved I am that we're no longer in the 108s here in Austin, Texas.
Yes, I know. Fall is definitely one of my favorite times of year. It was so hot before, so I'm definitely glad that we get to break out some of the sweaters. So, yeah.
Sweater season. Woohoo!
Yes. So today we're talking about how to improve data literacy. And before we dive into that topic, would you like to share a little bit about yourself with our viewers?
Sure. Well, it's a pleasure to be here. I have watched a few of your prior episodes of Ask a Trainer, so it's a pleasure to be finally as a guest after having been an audience member for so long. So, about me, I've played nearly every role in learning and development over the past 15 to 20 years. I say 15 to 20 because I started my first teaching gig was actually in Mexico, where I was teaching English as a foreign language, and some would classify that as like a stint in learning and development. Others wouldn't. But nonetheless, it's where I fell in love with teaching and learning. And, fast forward, I went and got my doctorate degree, taught in higher ed, taught in corporate, taught in the nonprofit government world, taught in public health, did curriculum writing in all those places as well. And the one thing that I feel the most privileged is every organization, for the most part, that I worked with, especially earlier in my career, we all were data nerds, and it was essential for us we used Salesforce before Salesforce was what everybody used, 15 years ago. And I was just so lucky. I realize now that I had that early training with a data mindset, working with tools to collect data in ways that we had naming conventions and all these kinds of best practices that just got instilled in me that I now get to benefit intuitively from in my work. And it's a pleasure to talk about one of my absolute favorite topics today, which is, of course, data literacy.
Yay! And I can't wait to talk with you about this topic. And I'm so glad that you finally a guest on this show. Thank you for joining me again. ATD just published its measurement and evaluation report recently, and there were some key findings that they summarized in that report. Some of those key findings I'll just summarize them really quickly, is that, 1 in 3 talent development professionals rate their organization as fair or poor at measuring the effectiveness of learning programs. Less than half of respondents were saying that they're not getting as many opportunities to improve their skills in data literacy. And it's just really important to be a data-driven organization. And there's some recommendations on how to do that. So the first question that I have for you, Elena, is why is it so important to be a data-driven organization?
So I'm going to give you the big picture answer, and then I'll drill down into it. But I think this is the most inspiring and motivating response to the question, and that is one word: empowerment. I feel like so many of us, regardless of the role that we play in organizations, but primarily in learning and development, we don't always feel empowered to make suggestions or push back to stakeholders when we might intuitively feel a better solution is out there. Sometimes if we don't have the data, it's really difficult to make a case, an argument, or feel comfortable even bringing up to people who are supervisory roles or stakeholders in the organization. And so having good data and understanding intuitively how to work with data, how to access data, make data tell stories, it's really empowering, because not only do we get to see, are we being effective? It's empowering because if we see opportunities for improvement, we can use our intuition and our personal experience and combine that with data and say, hey, I have this recommendation. What do you think? And it's not just me, Elena, using my hunches to make a suggestion. I can back those hunches up with some evidence within the organization. That's really empowering. And, as I was reflecting on these questions prior to this recording, the other piece that really stood out to me as I reflect on my own career is actually like I enjoy my work more. I enjoy showing up every day, and I feel like my quality of life is simply better having data literacy skills, feeling comfortable using data, because not only do I get to save time, if I'm doing something that is time consuming, I use data to figure out how can I reduce my time or maybe eliminate that thing altogether. And data literacy and the ability to use data makes all of those things possible. And that empowerment is really important, I think, especially in the workplace culture where we're seeing so many people turning over, looking for other opportunities. Feeling empowered in your job is huge right now.
Yeah, those are some really great points. And thank you for highlighting those benefits. I think just the key takeaway, is empowerment. It empowers you, it empowers the organization, makes your job easier. Those are such great points. And I find those super interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So there are challenges to measuring impact. It's like while it's great, it's empowering, it's beneficial, there are challenges. And some of the things that were highlighted in this report is just there's this difficulty to isolate training impact. Some participants may not respond to evaluations, and there may be a lack of access to getting that data. So I'm wondering what recommendations you might have to address some of these challenges that talent development professionals are experiencing.
So, if anyone is hearing these challenges and feeling like overwhelmed, it's okay. There are a lot of challenges to measuring learning impact, and they've existed for a long time. And it can feel like trying to push a rock up a hill when you hear all of those challenges. And there is what I like to think of as a pretty simple solution to make that rock feel just a little bit lighter. We're always going to have to be pushing something uphill when it comes to measuring learning outcomes because there's so many pieces of the puzzle involved in that project. But one thing makes that easier, and that's getting clear on what you're doing and why. I call it strategy. I also sometimes think of it as a hypothesis statement that you can map out. And I have a whiteboard behind me here for a reason. I love storyboarding. What am I doing and why? And I literally write down if people participate in our learning programs, what are they going to get out of it? What's it doing for the business? What are those performance changes? And you had Kevin M. Yates here on the Ask a Trainer conversation. And I agree with him. We have to get super clear at that behavioral level. Like, what is it that learning and development is doing to influence performance and create that hypothesis? Well, if those performance changes grow, what does that do for the business? And what does that do if you want to take that even further from the dollars and cents perspective, if you are interested in the ROI? But before we design and deliver anything, and before we invest in any solution, like, let's map that out. And if you need some help, like, talk with your colleagues, talk with people in other departments, talk with stakeholders and say, hey, you want us to deliver this training. Well, what do you hope it does for the business? And what do you hope it does to improve performance? And how does all this stuff tie together? Storyboard it, map it out, and make it make sense. So many cases, once we do the work to map out our hypothesis of what we're doing and why, we're like, wait a minute, I don't really see the strong relationship between it, improving performance here and these business outcomes. Can you help me make that a bit stronger? Like, what's missing? In some cases, it's like we need another department to support the initiatives. In some cases, we're like, wait a minute, maybe this training solution isn't the right solution to get to the outcomes that we're seeking. But if we don't map out at that high level, what are we doing and why? All the other things are just really cumbersome. And especially this piece about isolating the influence of training on business outcomes, we have to start with a hypothesis, especially because The only reason we want to isolate training is because we know that training is not 100% of any solution for performance improvement or business goals. So if we know already that training is only a fraction of a solution, and we map out what we're doing and why, then we can say, you know what would really help this solution be even better? If we got the marketing department involved and they helped us promote this to the right people, or if we got IT department and we had them solve for some of sales tickets or tickets around challenges around these areas, right? Like training is part of a piece of a large organizational operational pie. Getting clear on what we're doing and why helps us to then go, training can do this thing, and this department can do this thing, and this department can do this thing. And then all of us together are working to create a comprehensive solution. But if we don't have that hypothesis in place and we're not having those conversations, everything else is just really difficult. We're back to holding that rock at the bottom of the hill going, is this going to work?
Yeah. Yeah. I really like that. I like that, framing it as kind of like this hypothesis statement. And I think it just creates this roadmap that just helps you kind of get to that. It helps you prioritize measuring impact first so that you have this solid roadmap for developing a learning solution. I really like that. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I will say, like, you listed a ton of challenges, and I only spoke directly to the isolating the effective training, but like not having access to the data, not having the resources that you need to collect the data. If you've got that hypothesis and you can say to a department leader or a stakeholder, here's what we'd like to do and why this matters and what we hope will come about because of this intervention, imagine the buy-in that you get. You probably are going to have a higher chance of getting access to the data that you need or getting the resources that you need to collect the right data. But oftentimes, if we don't have that roadmap and we don't involve other people in helping us map it out, and it doesn't have to take forever. Like you could literally do this in a 30-minute meeting if you were really efficient. Maybe an hour would be good, right? It just makes everything else easier.
All right, so data skills are just 1 in 10 of the most important skills that talent development professionals need to get ahead. So I was wondering if you could explain the difference between data literacy and data analysis. And then can you share some strategies or practical tips that L&D professionals can implement so that they can improve their data literacy skills in and out of the workplace?
Yes. Okay. So remember I told you how much I like whiteboarding? Well, I'm going to whiteboard an answer to this question for
yay.
you. Okay. So I can't promise that my drawing skills are going to be the best, but you'll get the idea. Okay. Imagine this crooked looking thing that's a bucket. So data literacy is the bucket, and all the other things that you mentioned, analysis, collection, communicating the outcomes of your data analysis to stakeholders, understanding different methodologies for data collection and using them in different cases. All of these are small little parts, skills, if you will, that make up a competency of your data literacy bucket. So imagine you start your career and maybe you have your bucket filled up just part of the way because maybe in your career, all you've ever needed to do is read reports to understand, historical data. Well, then as time goes on, you continually fill that bucket up with more experience, more teaching and learning, more courses, more mentors that teach you things, right? So the more that time and experience and intentional learning and development occurs in your life, your bucket will get fuller and fuller with those different skills that are making it possible to be data literate. So it's a never-ending journey, especially as we think of things like machine learning and artificial intelligence. Like all of that is made possible by data. So you can imagine how many jobs there will continue to be in the future in the space of data and machine learning simply because of the future of where technology is headed. That's a new skill. Understanding how those things work together is going to be another skill that I'm personally am focused on in my data literacy bucket. And so it's not that they're isolated. They all really do work together to make our competency of data literacy as strong as it can be. And that's one heavy bucket, and you'll have strong muscles as you carry it around, to continue my metaphor further.
I like it. Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
that's awesome.
So the other question that you asked is, what can we do if we don't have the skills that we need inside of our data literacy competency bucket? And here is something that I can personally share that I started doing myself. Long time ago, before credit card companies gave you this data, I was motivated to budget for the first time in my life. I was wanting to buy a house, and I was overspending. And I didn't have any systems in place personally. I didn't have an Excel spreadsheet or an app or anything that helped me understand, where is my money going, so that I can understand, where am I overspending? Where can I cut back? And so I took a personal agenda. Like, I was really motivated to save money to buy my first house. And I knew I needed to figure out my spending habits and make better habits. And so I did a whole data mining project. Again, before Chase did this for me, which now I just use Chase's insights. But before Chase did that, I used an Excel spreadsheet and I data mined, and I went back to all of my spending, and I just categorized all the dollars and cents every month. Where was it going? Where could I cut back? That's data literacy. You're basically practicing methods of data collection. Where can I source information about my spending? Where do I put it to integrate all of that data to make it easier to analyze trends? And then once I look at all of those trends, I have to communicate to myself, or to maybe my partner, where are my spending habits? And then we can make informed decisions to improve my ability to budget. And that's a perfect example. It's so simple, but that's data literacy. It's so pick something in your personal life that really matters to you. You've got, some people are interested in growing their net worth. Some people have profit and loss statements for their freelance or consulting practice. And they're like, I want to understand, where can I cut back on my expenses such that I can improve my profit margin? That's data literacy. So there's got to be somewhere in your life that each one of your listeners will be able to go, I can make improvements here. And how do I use data to figure out, how do I improve? Simple way to just practice using data to make informed decisions. And that's what it's all about in the end.
That's great. Yeah. And that is really simple. That's a really great way to think about it too. You don't, something that you do probably on a daily basis, or that you look at, you don't think of it in that way. So that's really interesting. Yeah, that's a good tip. Okay. So I have another question for you about a cool project that you're working on. We're currently working on the On a Shoestring series, and you're one of the authors of the Measurement and Evaluation on a Shoestring book. Yay. So I'm wondering if you could share a little bit about what you're working on with that book and what you hope readers will take away from this book.
My mom is a writer, and she's not at all data literate. She doesn't like math or numbers. And it's my goal to write this book in such a way that it's accessible to anybody, regardless of your experience working with data, with numbers. I get excited. I nerd out about research, and I have experience in that. But to be honest, not everybody feels the same way that I do about it. And there's a lot of books out there that talk about measurement and evaluation and methodologies. And there's some really good ones out there. But if you can't sit down and read it because it's not accessible, and whatever that means to you, then it's not helpful. And so my goal with this book is to make it accessible. And of course, the shoestring framework is one where, if you're under-resourced, if you don't have a lot of knowledge or experience, and you still want to measure learning outcomes, how do you do that without it costing you tons of time or money, or requiring a really high level of expertise? So small, simple strategies to measure and evaluate learning. And that's what the book's all about.
Thank you, Elena, for sharing a little bit about the book and for sharing your tips for how to be more data literate inside and out of work. So, Elena, if folks want to keep up with you and everything that you've got going on, where can they find you?
So I am on LinkedIn. I post regularly, and I also host a community of practice called Measurement Made Easy. I'm sure not a surprising name based upon the measurement and evaluation on a shoestring mission. And so, yeah, it's a free community of practice. That's really what I'm focused on right now, is building a movement of people who are all interested in building data literacy skills, whether they're in learning and development or not. And our community of practice is an amazing opportunity to build skills, connect with other people, and do it synchronously or asynchronously. And I do share some little tips from the book and learn from other people to include insights from their experience in the book as well. So it's really a passion and just a way I can give back to the community as well.
All right. Well, thank you, Elena, so much for being on this episode of Ask a Trainer.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for watching this episode of ATD's Ask a Trainer series. If you want to keep up with all the great things that Dr. Alaina Szlachta has going on, make sure to check out our show notes below. And if you want to find out when our next episode of the Ask a Trainer series is going live, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that bell icon to be notified when our next video drops. I'm Jess Thompson, and thanks so much for watching.